Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues now. And make sure to stay tuned to catch me, Mike Gallagher, coming up at 9, only on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The question of 2020 is, what's it going to be? As Ken Griffin, Citadel founder, billionaire, Chicago billionaire, said in his interview with Bloomberg the other day.
So as people think about socialism, do you want to go back to the world where half the world lives in absolute horrific poverty with a diminution of freedom? Or do you want to embrace the society that we live in today and fight to make it better?
Poverty, apparently. That's what Democrat socialists are saying, and that's against the backdrop of the other philosophy continuing to produce results, inhibited as the markets are by Leviathan at its current size, much less the size that the Democrat socialists would like to see it achieve. 263,000 new jobs created in April, according to DOL. Unemployment rate, which we've established here, doesn't mean anything, but we'll report it nonetheless, 3.6%. For more on this topic and a couple of others, we're pleased to be joined by our friend again, Scott the Cow Guy, Scott Shellady, Fox Business contributor. Scott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
So 263,000 jobs, beat street estimates. Pretty good. Doesn't look like a recession is in the offing.
No, I mean, it's a tough day to be on the left. They're going to have a hard time spinning this. We were just sitting here in the booth. We're on the floor of the exchange at the moment, looking at some of the websites of your other competitors, and CNN and MSNBC are buried the whole thing. I mean, it's pretty funny to see. Yeah, we've got some historic firsts. I mean, this is the lowest we've seen the unemployment rate since Richard Nixon was in office. How's that sound? And then we have the adult women unemployment rate of 3.1% is the lowest since 1953. So something's going right, and we were only expecting 190,000 jobs, and we got 263. That was a big beat, as well as the revisions for the last 2 months were a net positive of 16,000 jobs. So I guess if you want to pick something negative out of this, the labor participation rate fell, which is not a good thing, but that's kind of a queasy number, and a lot of times it has to do with the amount of baby boomers kind of falling out of the job market. So that was one of the only negatives there. But we still don't see any inflation, Dan. I mean, the economy, you can't say it's on fire, but it's definitely strong, moving in the right direction.
It seems like the only negative is we don't have the people to fill all these jobs that are being created.
Well, I mean, in round numbers, we've got just over 7 million jobs out there that are unfilled, and only 6 million people to fill them. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, there's a ton of other reasons why. I mean, we've got a problem with opiates in the country. That's why these people really can't sign up and get on board. But yeah, I mean, the problems that we're having now are great problems to have, right? They're winning problems versus losing problems, and it's looking like, I mean, even now with Europe and the doldrums, their economies are shrinking. Their social and cultural issues are blowing up. Asia still can't buy themselves out of their problem, and here the U.S. sits, having cut a lot of the regulations and taxes, and away we go. And it's just proven to be a winning combination. I'm generally a little bit morose and not thinking that things are that fantastic, but this is a hard one. I mean, how are you going to spin this if you're Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders? It's going to be very, very difficult.
This is a very cheerful Scott Shellady this morning, I must say. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where could we still be doing better, though? As good as we're doing, I was reading a lot about the auto market in the U.S. and how we are still kind of slumping there. Is there an area where we're still weak?
Retail still weak. I mean, if you break them out, construction, we had 33,000 jobs added. Retail, we lost 12,000 last month. So manufacturing is a small up 4,000. Service sector, 200,000, all good. So I would say that in order to have a real strong economy, you need to see the labor force participation rate up around 64-65%. And right now we were at 63, and we just dropped down to 62.8. And that's probably the biggest negative in there, because when you take people out of the participation, when you take people out of the employment force, that's how you can see that stupid unemployment rate dip down, right? Because there's less people unemployed because they just fell out of the unemployment picture.
Yeah, but something else that you market eggheads talk about is an indicator, productivity. And as James Freeman reported in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Productivity of non-farm workers increased 3.6% seasonally adjusted annual rate in the first quarter. That's from a year earlier. Productivity rose 2.4%. That's the best year-over-year gain since the third quarter of 2010, when the economy was emerging from the Great Recession. So workers' wages are up because their productivity is up, and those are both good indicators.
Right, and what's surprising is the wages are going up, which is good, and the productivity is really going up more than even wages are, because the unit cost of production now is actually kind of going down a little bit, right? So they're making so much more hourly than they as far as widgets go, for the same pay, or maybe slightly more than we did before, and that's really, really good. So a lot of that also has to do with why inflation is low, because we're getting more efficient in the workforce. We've got a lot of technology that's come down the pipe that is also helping, and I think a lot of folks are having a difficult time, and I think Powell will probably struggle with this as well, about how much technology really is playing a role in this low inflation, because we've done everything we can. I say this almost every time I'm on, Dan, is that we've done everything we can to stoke some inflation. We just can't get it. And there was a little bit of a thought, probably the last 3 or 4 weeks, that Powell might have to cut rates because his inflation target is 2%, and we're about 1.5, 1.6. He was going to have to cut rates to bring up inflation rather than raise rates to dampen down inflation. But right now, obviously, with what he said this week, he's just going to stand on the sidelines. He's going to be very, very patient. Let the data, deliver whatever he needs to do, and away we go. So the market's taking this all pretty well. The stocks are up, and we haven't really seen interest rates spike on this news either. So all in all, this is kind of low inflation, interest rates not spiking, equities higher. A lot of people are happy today.
So you mentioned something earlier that had not occurred to me. We know we have an opioid epidemic in this country.
Yep.
And is there data to support, are you saying that is causing a slump in that labor participation rate? And is there a body of thought that supports that, or data that supports that?
There is data that supports the fact that we have a very large part of the younger working force segment that can't pass a drug test.
Wow.
Yeah, right. No question.
There's empirical data on that. I don't have it in front of me right now, but yes, and that's where I got it from, because that's why we have 7.5 million jobs that are unfilled with 6 million people out there looking, and it doesn't, and we can't get it done, and they just can't pass the drug test.
Well, and again, that 60 Minutes story on fentanyl that we talked about earlier in the week from this past Sunday, 2016, 47,000 dead Americans because of opioid overdoses. So that's a real problem on many levels. Scott, I wanted to ask you too about our friend of the show here, Steve Moore. We had him on Wednesday. He was, girding his loins for a 90-day fight over his nomination to the Fed board. Then he abruptly withdrew his nomination yesterday. Obviously, that was at the behest of the president, with Republican support for his nomination flagging in the Senate. And how you assess the nominations of Moore and Kaine, and then the demise of both of those nominations.
Well, I got to tell you, I don't know Herman Cain, but I know Steve, and I like both of those guys, at least what they have to say, and I respect them both a lot. But it's unfortunate in today's day and age that whatever you might have said on Twitter when you were 12 years old could come ultimately back to kill you, or erase your nomination. So it's all about digging up the dirt on people nowadays. That's not what they've accomplished and what they're doing, and people change over time. And I understand that you want somebody there that represents what the country thinks and what the president thinks, but sometimes people are people, and you can't. It's just hard for me to think that you're going to be held liable for everything in your past. And number two is that what kind of a candidate then can you put forward? What kind of a person do you put forward? That's got absolutely no closet. Is he boring? Is he just an egghead and just, lived in his mom's basement for his entire life? I mean, everybody's got something that they'd probably rather not everybody know. But it's unfortunate that it came back to bite him. Steve's a good guy. He's a very, very smart guy, and I think he would have represented a lot of what Donald Trump wanted to get done. But when you open up that Pandora's box of everybody's closet, it's just hard to get anybody over that hurdle.
It's a damn shame. He is a good guy, yep, and a good economist. And the additional thing in terms of what you're saying, going back to your social media account and your yearbooks and the like, it's not just that. It's also intentionally misconstruing any light moments, any sarcastic moments in your life or in your writings, and Steve had a bunch of them. I mean, the idea that he's some sort of, misogynist because he joked around about, female sportscasters. I mean,
He's the furthest thing from that.
He's a dork, and I say that in a complimentary
Right.
way. He's the most innocuous guy out there, and he's been made into, he's some sort of creepy misogynist because he criticized, because made a joke about Bonnie Bernstein on ESPN. It's ridiculous.
And that's what they're going to continue to do. And you know what? I got to tell you, I think Middle America doesn't fall for that. I think they don't like that, and I think what Middle America saw with the Kavanaugh hearings and then now with Barr, I think they're sick of that, and it's not fair, and it's not nice, and if that's how you're going to play, I mean, where are we going as a country? I mean, who ultimately can you put forward? It's got to be some troll from your mother's basement that doesn't have a past.
Or somebody with zero experience. I mean, I was embarrassed for my profession and as a member of the media on the questioning of him. Nobody even asked him about his economic policy. How do you feel about inflation? That wasn't even a question served up to him on national television shows in the last round on Sunday. It was embarrassing.
Well, it's because they were important questions, and nobody wants to ask those. I mean, look, when the head of the House Financial Committee, Maxine Waters, maybe it's when she doesn't know that the government is now the lender of student loans, not the big banks, and they've been out of it for 8 to 10 years, that tells you everything you need to know about how informed they are.
Yeah.
How important are these openings now, though, that we've lost Kane, we've lost Moore? Just to all the numbers that you're talking about, how important is it to get people in these positions on the Reserve Board who have the sort of thought process to keep the economy moving?
They're extremely important, and one of the good things that Trump has done, you can take his name off the top of the paper and you'd agree with most things he's done for the economy, if not all. And you need to have people that are like-minded that way and are like a Kudlow, pro-growth and let the people do the heavy lifting and rather than the government, and put the power back to the people, give it back to small business. And I think that is very, very important because, look, I can't stress this enough. What he's done for our economy with the decisions that he made about regulations and tax cuts and repatriating taxes, compared to the rest of the world, that's what you have to. You take us against the other 4 large central banks, and we're killing it. I mean, the rest, the people need to know the rest of the world's not doing very well, and a lot of them are shrinking. I mean, the other day we almost had the 10-year German bond go into a negative interest rate, which means they pay you.
Right.
You have to pay them to put your money in the bank. I mean, that's insane. But here we are with, our first quarter GDP was 3.2%. I mean, that's almost China-like, right? So I gotta think that with what we've had today, good, solid Goldilocks numbers, versus the rest of the world, it's hard not to get excited about that, and it's very important to keep like-minded officials and like-minded legislators on board with that.
An underreported story this week, the infrastructure deal, agreement in principle between Trump, Pelosi, and Schumer, $2 trillion infrastructure deal. Underreported, because of all the Barr Mueller stuff. I'm always a little bit nervous when both parties quickly agree to spend a lot of money. And, we have short memories. It was just a decade ago that shovel-ready stimulus became a punchline, and that was $900 billion. This is $2 trillion. 90% of the Obama stimulus, in quotation marks, didn't go to anything that could legitimately be called leveraging infrastructure, improving infrastructure for economic growth. It was, local swimming pools at the Park District and that kind of crap. So what about this $2 trillion deal that both sides are touting? Should we be skeptical?
Even more skeptical than you are with your sarcasm. I'm very skeptical. I mean, I wouldn't have given them the time of day after the way things were or still are playing out with the border wall. And so all of a sudden they flip and they're friends, and we can come to a quick agreement like that on a large amount of money. I wouldn't have trusted him in a million years, and I think I'd be very skeptical and very suspicious, and I think that he should go down he should be very, very, very careful.
He is Scott Shellady, Scott the Cow Guy, Fox Business contributor. Scott, thanks as always for joining us.
All right, have a good weekend, guys.
You too. And he